December 17th, 1944. Dawn breaks over a frozen Belgian field. The most elite armored commander in the German army stands motionless, staring at something that will haunt him for the rest of his life. It's not enemy soldiers. It's not superior weapons. It's thousands of fuel containers, abandoned by retreating Americans like worthless trash. What he discovered in that moment would shatter everything the Third Reich believed about winning this war. This is the story of how 50,000 gallons of gasoline revealed Germany's most devastating secret. They were already defeated, and they never even knew it. Meet Joachim Peiper, at 29, one of the youngest regimental commanders in the Waffen-SS, holder of Germany's highest military honors, veteran of brutal Eastern Front campaigns. His armored battle group was the spearhead of Germany's last desperate gamble, Operation Watch on the Rhine, the Battle of the Bulge. But as dawn broke on December 17, 1944, Peiper's unstoppable war machine had ground to a complete halt. Not from enemy fire, not from mechanical failure. From something far more devastating: empty fuel tanks. His Tiger tanks, mobile fortresses weighing 60 tons each, sat silent. His 149 half-tracks were motionless. Nearly 5,000 of Germany's most elite soldiers were paralyzed by a crisis that would reveal the war's most shocking truth. Through the morning mist, Peiper spotted the abandoned American depot at Houffalize. What he found there would change everything. Rows upon rows of jerry cans stretched as far as the eye could see. 50,000 gallons of high-octane gasoline, abandoned so hastily that coffee was still hot in American mess cups. Oil drums, still, burned for warmth. The Americans had fled so quickly they couldn't even destroy their supplies. Peiper's logistics officer pried open the first container and inhaled premium American fuel, higher quality than anything German vehicles had used in months. As his men frantically refueled their war machines, Peiper began calculating. This single depot contained enough fuel to power his entire battle group for weeks. But here's what shattered his mind. If the Americans could afford to abandon such massive quantities, fuel that would have been guarded by entire German divisions, what did that say about their true industrial capacity? The mathematics were staggering. This abandoned depot contained more fuel than most German divisions had received in 6 months of combat. But here's where this story gets absolutely mind-blowing. 6 months earlier, Albert Speer had delivered a report to Hitler that should have ended all German offensive operations immediately. Allied bombing had destroyed 90% of Germany's synthetic fuel production. The Leuna works, once producing 175,000 tons monthly, managed only 5,000 tons by September 1944. Meanwhile, the United States was producing 1.8 billion barrels of crude oil annually. Germany, including all synthetic production and captured Romanian fields, managed just 33 million barrels, less than 2% of American output. The Third Reich was attempting mechanized warfare with horse-drawn logistics, while America was drowning its armies in petroleum abundance. The German High Command had allocated 5 million gallons for the entire Ardennes offensive. Sounds impressive until you realize that American forces in Europe were consuming 1.2 million gallons per day and receiving 1.4 million gallons daily. They were accumulating reserves while fighting a global war. Peiper's fuel allocation was 31,000 gallons, enough for 50 miles of combat operations. The distance to his objective on the Meuse River was 65 miles. The mathematics of failure were built into the plan from the beginning. That same morning, just 20 miles away, Captain James Rose of the U.S. 743rd Tank Battalion recorded in his diary, "Received fuel resupply 8,000 gallons. Third delivery this week. Storage tanks already at capacity." While Germany's elite forces rationed every drop, American tank crews were complaining about having too much fuel to store. As Peiper's column pushed deeper into Belgium with their captured fuel, they made more discoveries that defied comprehension. At every crossroads, Americans had fuel depots. Every major position had stockpiles that exceeded German divisional allocations. But the most devastating blow came at Stavelot, where Americans had accumulated over 2 million gallons, enough to guarantee Piper's forces could reach their objective. As his advance guard approached, American engineers were already at work. Captain John Brewster received simple orders: deny fuel to the enemy at all costs. At 4:30 p.m. on December 17th, white phosphorus grenades ignited fuel trails between massive stockpiles. The explosion shot flames 100 feet into the sky. Within minutes, 2 million gallons, more fuel than Germany had allocated for their entire offensive, was burning in a pillar of black smoke visible for miles. Standing before that inferno, Piper finally understood the impossible truth. One of his officers later recalled, "The commander stood on his tank turret watching the flames for 5 minutes without speaking. Then he climbed down and said, 'They can afford to burn 2 million gallons to deny them to us. What are we doing here?'" Across the Ardennes, American engineers destroyed over 8 million gallons rather than risk capture. They were casually destroying more fuel than Germany possessed for their last desperate offensive. This wasn't just abundance. This was abundance so overwhelming that millions of gallons could be treated as expendable. But here's what truly broke: German morale. The fuel being destroyed wasn't even considered strategically important by American standards. While Germans were burning their last reserves, Americans were building up supplies for January operations. Brigadier General Morris Gilland had requested 245 million gallons for the coming month, approved without discussion. By December 21st, Piper was surrounded at L'Église, his tanks immobile from empty fuel tanks. The American forces encircling him, 31st Infantry Division, 82nd Airborne 3rd Armored, had a combined fuel allocation of 340,000 gallons for that single day. Piper had perhaps 1,000 gallons remaining. Private First Class Richard McKinney wrote home, "We've got Germans surrounded who ran out of gas. Our captain jokes we use more fuel heating coffee than they have for tanks." The contrast was surreal. American air operations on December 23rd consumed more fuel in one day than Germany's entire offensive allocation. Each P-47 fighter burned 300 gallons per hour. Each B-26 bomber consumed 200 gallons hourly. A single day of Allied air support used more petroleum than the German war machine possessed. On the night of December 23rd, Piper abandoned his vehicles and escaped on foot. Of 119 tanks and assault guns that began the offensive, 39 remained operational but were destroyed, not by enemy fire, but because they had no fuel to move them. His forces had advanced 60 miles, captured several major depots, and discovered the crushing truth about Allied logistics. They weren't fighting a war, they were participating in their own execution. The knowledge spread rapidly through German command. Field Marshal Walter Model's chief of staff recorded his reaction to the fuel reports. The Field Marshal read the quantities twice: 50,000 gallons captured at Houffalize, 2 million burned at Stavelot, 8 million destroyed rather than risk capture. He said, we are not fighting the same war. The Battle of the Bulge wasn't lost through tactical failure or superior American courage. It was predetermined by industrial mathematics. While Germany measured fuel by the liter, America measured it by the million gallons. One side fought for every jerry can while the other burned oceans of petroleum. Every German who witnessed American abundance understood the war was already over. They had discovered an enemy whose waste exceeded their total resources. The 50,000 gallons that seemed miraculous to Piper represented less than what a single American armored division consumed in 2 days. Today, visitors to the museum at L'Église can see Piper's Tiger tank exactly where it ran out of fuel on December 23, 1944. Former enemies who met there 40 years later had a revealing exchange. The German veteran asked why the Americans had stopped advancing. The American replied, "We never knew you were that short of fuel. We had so much we never thought about it." That exchange captured the truth of December 1944. One side measured victory in gallons, the other measured it in oceans. The outcome was never in doubt. It was encoded in every abandoned jerry can at Houffalize, every gallon burned at Stavelot, and every pipeline stretching across liberated Europe. Sometimes wars aren't won by the bravest soldiers or the most brilliant tactics. Sometimes they're won by the side that can afford to destroy what their enemy would die to possess.